Welcome back, my friends. Thanks again for joining us for another episode as we take a few minutes out of our day in God's Word. We are in the book of 1 Samuel as we're coming to the end of this Old Testament historical book. If you're following along with us in the Scriptures, we are in 1 Samuel chapter number 29. Now, just for a level of context to get an idea where we're at, we have this kind of break between chapter 27 and chapter 29. Chapter 27, David, remember, he has found himself. He hid away from Saul in the land of the Philistines. He had been lying to the king and been taking out Israel's enemies while living there and then claiming that he was taking out the Philistines' enemy. Well, in this situation, we ended with a couple basic things. We ended with one, David is now being asked to go fight with the king of Philistine against Israel. And then here comes a question. David really shouldn't have been there to begin with. Does God help him? Does God get him out of this? Then we learn that Saul, really nervous about the war that's going to come, and goes finds a medium. We talked about that last time. So let's take a little bit and unpack just a few verses in chapter 29 and see how God graciously delivers David from this circumstance he should have never been in. 1 Samuel 29, verse 1, Then the Philistines gathered together all their armies at Aphek, and Israelites encamped by the fountain which is in Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines passed in review by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men passed in review at the rear with Achish. And the princes of the Philistines said, What are these Hebrews doing here? And Achish said to the princes of the Philistines, Is this not David, the servant of Saul, king of Israel, who has been with me these days or these years? And to you this day have I found no fault in him, since he defected to me. But the princes of the Philistines are angry with him. So the princes of the Philistines said to him, Make this fellow return, that he may go back to the place which you have appointed for him, and do not let him go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he become our adversary. For with what he could reconcile himself to his master, if not the heads of these men? Is this not David, of whom they sang to one another in the dances, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. So what happened was the lords, you've got the king, but you've got the lords, the heads of the army that were coming in, heads of the government that were coming in, and they were evaluating the people, making sure that they had the right people to go to war. And in all of this evaluation, they come up against David and his 600 men. Well, they look back and they just didn't make sense to them. Now maybe they thought the king was naive. We're not really sure. All we know is, to them, it didn't make sense. The king's like, he's been here, he's been loyal, he's been great. Now, unfortunately, the king is not fully aware of all the things that David has done, but that's not the point. He believed it. You've been loyal, he's been this, he should fight with us, this is a good thing. And they said, but wait a minute. I know that he's in exile against the king, but what better way for him to gain access back to loyalty with the king than take our heads? He could win that back. The idea would be is that they thought maybe, the premise, and a lot of people thought this, that David was running from Saul for a legitimate reason, that David had done something wrong. Saul had every right, because what king is going to chase down subject for no reason? So, no one probably, the Philistines weren't going to be aware of what God had done and that he was going to be off the throne. So there's obviously got to be a valid reason. It looked like David was going to try to take over the kingdom, so it made sense. What better way to get back into Saul's great graces than with taking a bunch of Philistines, surprising them on the battlefield? So they said, no, we're getting out. By the way, we really don't know what David would have done. I know David probably found himself in a spot he didn't want to fight against his home people. So you've got God in a really simple way saying, we're going to just use these Philistines and a relatively legitimate argument and say we're going to stop. Now, here's intriguing how David responds to this. Then Achish called David and said to him, Surely, as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and you're going out and you're coming in with me, and the army is good in my sight. Now, I want you to catch something. Achish comes and says, you've been loyal to me, you've been good, but please remember, we studied, a couple episodes ago, that David had not been honest with him. David had been going out and defeating his enemies. Achish says, who are you going after? Because I'm going after the children of Judah. Remember, that was not right. So Achish was, he was killing everybody so that nobody could tell Achish what was really going on. Achish had been living and believing a lie. And he said, I know you've been loyal, you've gone out. So you recognize he believed the lie. So he goes, you've been upright going in and coming out with me in my sight for this day. He continues in that verse, I have found no evil in you since the day of your coming. Nevertheless, the Lord's do not favor you. Therefore return now and go in peace, that you may not displease the lords of the Philistines. And so he's told that the lords won't let it happen. Here's David's response in verse 8. So David said to Achish, but what have I done? And to this, what have you found in your servant as long as I be with you, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king? And Achish answered and said to David, I know that you are as good in my sight as the angel of God. Nevertheless, the princes of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up with us to battle. Now therefore rise early in the morning with your master's servants, who have come with you, and as soon as you are up early in the morning and have light, depart. So David and his men rose early to depart in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. So this was the intriguing part, was that he actually begins to play the game. He goes, what have I done? Why would you allow this to happen? He didn't really want Achish to believe, oh, thank you, I didn't really want to do this. So he's kind of going along with the game, playing the game. So you'd ask the question, why would he do this? Why would David play that game? Well, we know, granted, if you are familiar with this account, you've read 1 Samuel, or what we've mentioned just in the last couple episodes, that in a little bit, this battle that's about to ensue is the one that takes Saul's life. We know that. So you look at this story and you say, well, it doesn't make sense. It won't be long before David's return. David becomes king. David didn't know that. It's another part of Scripture when you interpret, especially when you're reading an historical narrative or you're reading something. We look at the stories. We look at the stories of David and Goliath, and we look at the story of Noah and Jonah and Moses and Job, and we know the ends, especially if you've read them. We know the ends, or we can read the ends of these stories. So we look back and we see what's going on at the tense part, or why people react and say, well, why would they act that way? I mean, good night. In 2 pages, you're going to be resolved from this. 2 pages could be many years. But one of the things that is intriguing is we have to remember that these men were unaware of what was going to take place. They can't see beyond. It's like us living today. We don't know what's coming. Can I give you an interesting thought? Actually, it's kind of hit me as I'm thinking about that in this area for us in trust. We can see the end of the story. We can see how God worked, and we learned a bit about God's character and man's trust. We can't see beyond today. We can't see beyond at all. We don't know what's coming next week, next month, next year. We got prayer requests. We got things we're working on. We don't know what God's doing next, but God does. So just like these men had to trust God, and it was easy for us to watch because we've seen it, we need to learn to trust God the same way. Here's what I pull from this that I find intriguing is that I'm not sure David should have been in this spot. And yet, because we already seen God had delivered David more than once while hiding out. And so he was in a rough scenario. But in that fact, God's grace is seen here. And by the way, you can see God's grace all out throughout the Old Testament. God's grace is seen that David went where he shouldn't have, and God said, you know what, I still want to use you. I'm not done with you. Let me give you a way out. Can I encourage you? I don't know where you are, where you find yourself. God's grace is always sufficient to get you through it or to bring you back if you find yourself in a spot that maybe you shouldn't be in or you wish you weren't in, even sometimes by your own decisions. Turn to God. Let him help be the one to bring you back, and recognize his grace as he makes those adjustments and gives that change in your life. Well, we do appreciate the privilege you've given to us to be part of your day. I hope it's an encouragement. Stick with us as we're going to jump in for one more time this week to chapter 30, and we're going to dig a little deeper, dig deeper and continue to look as we look at David as we finish up the last section of the book of 1 Samuel. Thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again next time.